Hello, everyone. I've got the top of the hour, so I thought we would go ahead and get started. I know we'll probably have a few more folks joining us as we get going, but I wanted to um, get started on the slides. I know we're here in the evening, and I'm so glad to have so many of you here, but also know, evening gets a little bit of a tougher hang. So thank you again for being here. Just so you know that we're in the faculty webinar, so everybody here should be a faculty member, and we're going to be talking about supporting your undergraduate writers. So here with you tonight from the Writing Center, I am Amber Cook. I'm one of your presenters, and I'm the Associate Director of Faculty Outreach and Support for Walden University's Writing Center. And I'm the one who sends the emails. So if you are on the Writing Center email list, I'm the one who puts those together and sends those to you every month. If you're not on that list, please just reach out to me. I'd love to add you. And I'm here tonight with Veronica Oliver. She's one of the writing instructors at Walden's Writing Center. She's going to be my co-presenter. And then behind the scenes with us today is Ann Scheel. She's going to be monitoring the chat and handling a lot of our technology tonight. She's our resource manager for faculty and student webinars. So she's our guru covering all of the webinars that we offer from the Writing Center. I'm going to hand things over to her briefly so she can talk about a few housekeeping details.
Thanks, Amber, and Guru is far too kind. Welcome, everybody. We're so glad you're here with us tonight. We're recording the webinar, and the recording will be available in our webinar archive later this week, most likely. And there's closed captioning available today during the live session. And if you'd like to switch that on, you can do that just for yourself at the probably at the bottom of your screen. It might be at the top of your webinar room in the control panel with the closed captioning button. I've posted the slides in the chat box, although if you've just joined us recently, you may not see those. So I'll post those again in just a moment if you'd like to download them. And Amber will also send those out in her follow-up email after the webinar. You are welcome to chat with us throughout the webinar. As Amber mentioned, I'll be keeping an eye on the chat box and answering any questions there. Feel free to comment as well. And Zoom also has some interactions or reactions that you can use if you'd like, which are also found in that toolbar where you can let us know if you would like Amber and Veronica to slow down in their presentation or to speed up, or if you have a question and would like to raise your hand or use any of the emojis to give your reactions there. And lastly, if you have any technical trouble, you might try exiting and entering the webinar room. We also recommend using the Chrome browser, and also that support.zoom.us website is a great one to go to for extra help. And actually, the very last thing here from me is that you are welcome to share your video tonight and or your audio. You certainly don't have to, but that is available for you if you'd like to. And I'll hand it back to you, Amber.
Thank you, Anne. And I will admit that I am having some technical difficulties with my webcam, which I think is just as well because this hour at my house with teenagers, it's not always pretty. So, but we are happy to see your faces if you'd like. All right, so the agenda for tonight, we're going to be talking kind of briefly about the kind of big picture of undergraduate students at Walden and how they intersect with the Writing Center, what we notice, how we engage them. And then we'll be talking a bit about their unique needs as writers. Those of you who teach maybe in multiple student audiences, so maybe you're teaching with undergraduates and with graduate students, know at Walden and elsewhere, it's a pretty different set of writing needs and writing support needs for undergraduate students. We'll talk a little bit about how to intersect with writing support at Walden. So your role is what we're calling the writing concierge, how you're going to kind of navigate getting information to your students. And we'll talk about a lot of our key services and resources for undergraduate students at Walden. And we're hoping to leave some time at the end as well for some group discussion. I know a lot of you in this room probably have a lot of wisdom to share with each other, or maybe perhaps have questions that you'd like to ask your colleagues about what's worked, what's not worked with student writers that you've been working with in the classroom or in Tempo competencies. And we'd love to make sure to leave some time for sharing there. We do have a quick poll. Speaking of all of those various roles, we're hoping to understand who's in the room, where you're actually working with undergraduate students at Walden. So if you could just select all that apply, if you work primarily with students in core courses, with students in gen ed courses through CGE, or if you're working in tempo competencies. And sorry, that should read competencies, not courses. So if you just take a minute to make some selections there. All right, looks like we've got most everybody voting. So Anne, if you want to show the poll results, we can close the poll. Looks like most of you are teaching in core courses, but we've got quite a few of you also in tempo competencies and in general ed or CGE courses. So that's great. We've got a good variety. This is helpful to know. All right, let's move along from here. So just a quick kind of I don't know, 30,000 foot view of undergraduate students in Walden. And this may be familiar to some of you, but for some of you, it might not be a piece of information you run across a lot. So undergraduate enrollment at Walden as of last fall was about 7,500. And that's up almost 10% between fall 2019 and fall 2020. So we know that this student population at Walden is growing. Undergraduate students at Walden, as I'm sure all of you know, are different than at a sort of traditional university. So some of the kind of demographic details we have about students at Walden, and this is for the 2020-2021 academic year, we know about 11%, but likely more, are first generation college students. We've got the majority of them in that 30 to 49 range. So I think they skew a bit younger than our graduate population, but not by a lot. The majority of these students are female, which again is pretty similar for the entire Walden population. And we do have some students within our undergraduate programs identified as military affiliated. We're going to have a little bit of information about resources for that student population as well. In terms of the colleges and programs with the highest numbers of undergraduate students, the College of Social and Behavioral Sciences has social work students and psychology students. Those tend to be two of the bigger programs, certainly two of the programs that we serve most frequently in the Writing Center, and also the College of Nursing with the RN BSN program. So before we jump in to some of the specifics of what we offer for students and what we're seeing in terms of their challenges, in the chat, if you could just chime in there, what writing skills are you seeing that are the biggest challenges for your undergraduate students? And you can kind of just chime in there in the chat, or like Anne said, if you'd like to unmute and answer it there as well, that would be fine as well. Sorry, every time I try to click my chat box to see more, I'm moving my slides. So I'm seeing APA, some resistance to APA, not citing and referencing APA, sensing a theme here. Anne, you want to read a few of these to me so I don't keep messing up my screen?
Absolutely, I can do that.
Thank you.
And you've definitely picked up on that theme of APA. So APA being a challenge, even some sort of resistance to trying APA at all, even with feedback. We're also getting some comments about grammar, spelling, punctuation, paragraphs, sentence structure, writing structure, organizing ideas, development, and lots more APA.
Thank you, Anne. Well, that lines up pretty well with what we've got on this next slide. Yeah, and that's an interesting comment, Robert, too. That's something that we hear a lot. Robert said that he sees a lot of resistance to APA, and the comment, "No one else requires it except you." And I think that's true. I mean, that's natural that faculty members will have sort of different degrees of, what's the word? Not quite rigidity, but insistence on adherence to APA or adherence to grammar rules or organizational principles. So students will legitimately have different experiences across their program because we're all human and we all have sort of different ways of placing emphasis on writing skills. But I definitely think in terms of APA that a lot of students at Walden in undergraduate programs are coming without much of a foundation at all. So that can be something that falls by the wayside as you're dealing with some of the more pressing issues around composition and scholarly voice and some of those things that are new as well. So that's interesting. So just to give you a sense of what we see, and when I say we, in the Writing Center, we work with students at the undergraduate level through our paper review service. We see them in webinars, we see them in course visits, and we'll talk about some of those specifics too. But we do notice some themes. In terms of paper reviews specifically, the topics that you see here on the screen, APA formatting, and particularly citation and references, that's both the number one topic that students request and one of the number one topics that we wind up talking about. Also paragraph structure, particularly analysis and synthesis. So kind of getting them away from the sense of everything being a summary or a kind of book report where they're just saying, here's what I read, but sort of working with it, interpreting and analyzing and synthesizing it. Connection and flow comes up quite a bit among these students, and not always self-identified. Sometimes they'll come in for a paper review and they'll say, I need help with APA or I need help with grammar. And they often do, but there are these other issues that are a little bit more holistic in terms of paragraph organization and things like that they don't always recognize, but once we're looking at their writing, we can comment on. And certainly connection and flow and grammar are on our list too. So this is a pretty typical set of challenges that we see for those students. I know for some of you, I think this shows up maybe more in some programs and more in some courses than others, but there is within most of the Blackboard classrooms for undergraduate students, the academic writing expectation. So this kind of set of started out as documents and they live within the Blackboard environment. And we've got some resources for them at the Writing Center as well. But there's been an effort to try to think about the focus at the different levels for students. So students in the 1000 level courses, a lot of the emphasis for writing is going to be on really broad scholarly writing concepts. So things like developing a thesis statement or using evidence to support a claim. So not necessarily the nitty gritty of what that looks like, but also some, just the sense of making sure that when you are pulling something from an outside source, that you're giving that source credit. Paraphrasing effectively, probably a lot of you could nod your head and say that's something that students struggle with early on, and sometimes not so early on. Things like sentence structure, grammar, and punctuation. And then those expectations move on at the 2000, 3000 level to get more at organization and flow, and then getting more into the nitty gritty of APA. So making sure they kind of understand the general APA format, citations, not just, citing them, but sort of citing them in APA style, and then moving into more scholarly tone and revision. And then by the 4000 level, that's when you start getting into the more detailed reference entry page, getting all of those things lined up in a little bit more strict APA format. And so that's something that, again, I know depending on what program you're in, depending on what course you're in, you may have had some exposure to this, or this may be something that's not really on your radar, but it's something that's available in most of those Blackboard classrooms in particular. So you may want to take a look if you haven't. It can be a helpful way to think about scaffolding these writing skills for students who are coming in sometimes with very little foundation in those same writing skills. So it's something to kind of be aware of as a tool for you. Some unique needs of undergraduate students that really translate into their writing. Part of it is a matter of confidence. So a lot of these students, most in fact, have stepped out of a previous program at some point. So there's a sense of them having had to stop. We don't know how long the gap is. Sometimes it's a long gap, sometimes it's a few years, sometimes even less. But writing confidence can certainly be an issue, and their sense that they don't necessarily belong or that they're not going to get it figured out. And a lot of times students at this level will articulate writing as kind of a gift or a talent, less than as a skill. So they'll kind of articulate to us sometimes that they're just not good at writing, or they're just, not, and I think sometimes that translates to them as sort of not smart or not able or capable. And so something we really try to talk about when we talk to students at this level is writing as a skill. Like anything else that they're learning, no one's born learning how to do scholarly writing or how to kind of write to an APA standard. This is just one of the many skills that they're going to be acquiring as they move through their program. But a lot of times you'll hear that in the way they talk about what they need from the Writing Center, that they're just convinced that they don't have the knack or the skill, and really it's something that can be learned. They also may not have an in-depth training in academic writing. They may have come from a professional environment. It might have been many, many years since the last time they were in an academic focused program. So that's something to also make them aware of. Academic writing is very different than professional writing or casual writing or email writing. So that's something that they just need to sort of allow themselves that time and patience to acquire this sort of new way of expressing themselves in writing. Work-life balance, of course, I'm sure you are aware of this with your students. There's many, many competing priorities. Certainly the last year has not made that easier for a lot of our students. We have a lot of working parents, a lot of people who are caretaking for either children at home or elderly relatives, and trying to then move into this space of focusing on writing can be very, very difficult. So sometimes you'll see that show up in the writing. You can tell, pieces of it have been written at a totally different time than other pieces of that same document. And then sometimes the reasons for pursuing the degree for undergraduate students aren't necessarily academic. They might be going into a professional setting. They're incentives for really, really understanding the ins and outs of academic expectations and APA formatting in particular, that might not appeal to them in the same way it would a graduate student or a doctoral student who plans to publish later. So their needs for knowing writing is a little bit more functional. And if there's ways to kind of make sure that it's also connected to their professional goals, that can be helpful too. Otherwise, it just feels like a hoop they're being asked to jump through, and you want to make sure, whenever possible, to kind of connect their goals to the learning of academic writing and scholarly writing. Some of the obstacles that we see a lot in undergraduate papers, part of it doesn't have to do with writing. So it's something like critical reading. A lot of what we see from students when we see them either not paraphrasing very well, overuse of direct quotes, or just writing way at the surface, they're not quite answering the prompt. It's clear that they're not totally understanding the assignment, or they're not totally understanding the reading. So that can be one of the issues for students, sort of reading comprehension. The reading level of some of the texts may be different than what they've been used to reading for many, many years. So just getting the basics of the content of the assignments and then the assignment prompt itself can sometimes be a little bit of a challenge. A lot of times students aren't really fluent in that idea of identifying a thesis or trying to find the main ideas and the main claims in their sources. So again, it can sometimes feel like they're kind of dancing around the edges of the evidence that they're supposed to be using and the readings that they're supposed to be referencing as they write. And you can often see that in the discussion boards as well, that you'll see, students sort of doing this was very interesting, I liked this, and it's not that they can't necessarily engage with the depth of the material, but they're still new at it. They're still getting used to trying to translate complex concepts into something that they can have something to say about. That's also kind of new. Reporting is one thing, but synthesizing or analyzing or creating something original out of it, that's still sort of new. A lot of students, really at any level, but I think especially at the undergraduate level, hesitate to reach out to faculty. I've taught several undergraduate courses, and it does feel like I'm just talking out to the void sometimes, that students, I'll sort of give them all of these ways to reach out to me, but I think the impulse is just to try to bang it out. They're just trying to get to the next assignment, trying to finish it up by the deadline while they're balancing so many other things. So there's not necessarily that kind of route between the student and faculty doesn't seem to be as reciprocal as you sometimes see in a graduate student environment. So it's one of those things that it's a kind of classroom culture piece, that the more you can set that expectation that you want to hear from them, you're receptive to questions, the more that they're going to reach out and do that. And certainly time constraints. It's really hard to write an effective paper in an hour. If they haven't left themselves time to outline or pre-write, or then later to revise and to edit, that's going to result in some weaker writing that they would probably be able to execute if they had more time. So anything that we can do to try to improve their skills, give them tips for self-editing, give them tips for pre-writing and outlining, and kind of getting those ideas down in an organized, efficient way is something that we try to work on with them as well. One last detail I wanted to offer before we start moving into some of our resources for undergraduate students is just to give you a sense of how undergraduate students are using us. And we'll talk more about what these resources are in a little bit. But in 2020, just kind of as a FYI, we had about 245 paper review appointments from undergraduate students. We had 42 course visits, and I don't think we have a plan to talk about this later, so I'll just mention briefly, course visits are something that we can provide to you as faculty. You can request a course visit for your Blackboard course, and we can come in and embed a discussion thread for about a week where we'll provide resources, we'll answer questions, and we'll just sort of provide a friendly face to those students who may not have explored the Writing Center or maybe a little bit Writing Center hesitant. It's a good way to kind of make that introduction in a kind of soft way. So if you're interested in that, please feel free to contact us after the session. We've had almost 2,000 module registrants, and Veronica will be sharing a little bit about what modules are here in a moment. 69 people attended webinars from within the undergraduate student body. And then in terms of the webinars that they're most drawn to, it was APA. So we're seeing a theme here for sure. Faculty would like to see students do a little bit more in APA. Students are reaching out for help in APA as well. And from here, I'm going to reach out to, or hand things over to Veronica.
Thanks, Amber. So as Amber mentioned, academic writing is, of course, a skill to develop. And we realize that faculty, while you'll notice some writing issues in students' papers, your focus is really the content. So as a concierge, you're going to help students with writing sort of through us, through the Writing Center resources that we have. Can you go to the next slide, Amber? Okay, so we're going to go over several different types of resources, but here's just a quick overview. We have extensive tutorials and resources on our website. So anything you could think of, APA, any type of scholarly writing topic, we have on our website, and we have tutorials on those. We also have a Writing Center blog. That's a little bit more informal than the website. Those are writing instructors writing about different topics for APA and scholarly writing. And they do provide some modeling within those blogs, but again, it's a little bit more informal. It's something, that students can kind of review in their own time, as opposed to digging deep into the website. We also have our WriteCast podcast. That's also a really nice informal resource for students. Instructors will basically talk about writing topics, and they will often use their own experiences and provide tips. And then, of course, we also have email support. Students are able to basically email us with specific questions. So I'm going to go into a little bit more detail then. If you could move this slide, Amber. Okay, so our website. So I'm going to put in, since you can't pull up the URL from the slides during our presentation, I'm just going to plug in the URL for our homepage. You can feel free to bring it up now if you would like. But I wanted to make a couple points about navigating our website. So from our home page, there's several ways in which a student can research a specific topic. So for instance, on the top right-hand side of the page, they can make a general search. So for instance, if they wanted to search APA citations, they could plug it in there, and they'll be provided like a list of different types of resources on APA. We also have in the middle here, what is quick answers. So we have several pre-made answers and resources for students if they want to look up a topic as well. For instance, if they have a question about APA citation, they can plug that into there just like they would in the larger search, and they'll be provided with specific information and resources there. And then, of course, on the left side of the screen, there are several different tabs that will take to specific resources we have, such as paper reviews, information on Grammarly, our webinars, and our modules. So we're going to talk about a little bit more of that in a moment. But again, we also have specific resources on our website for undergraduate students. And I'll just plug in the URL there if you want to bookmark it now, or if you want to wait till later when you download the slides, you could do that. And again, those are very specific resources for undergraduate students. If you could move the slide, Amber. Okay, so as I mentioned, we have the Writing Center blog. It's a really great source for a little bit more informational discussion on writing topics straight from our Writing Center writing instructors. It is searchable, so you can see there's a students can search for specific topics within the blog, and they can also subscribe to the blog by email. The next slide, please. And the WriteCast episodes, again, these are informal discussions that Writing Center instructors will have with each other on a variety of APA and scholarly writing topics, and they often bring in their own experience within those sessions. And to highlight some of those podcasts, as in line with what Amber was talking about before regarding some of the writing support that students at the undergraduate level would benefit from. We have an episode for strategies for critical reading. We also have an episode for the writing process. And then we have an episode for why the third time's a charm for Writing Center appointments. If you could move to the next slide. And then we have email support. So email support, it's available, of course, 24 hours, 7 days a week. We have writing instructors that are monitoring our writing support inbox. So students can write into us asking maybe, for instance, like a specific APA question, if they're unsure how to format something, or they have a question about scholarly writing. A writing instructor will respond to them, often providing modeling, if not at least some resources to help the student in the right direction. If you can move to the next slide, thank you. Okay, so here we have a little bit sources that will help students like with their writing, developing the writing skills over time. All of our resources do that, but some of them might be a little bit more supportive as students continue to develop their writing skills, and they've already explored some of our resources on the website, such as the web page, not our website, such as the website pages, our blog, and our webcast. So our tier 1 service is the asynchronous paper reviews. I'm going to be talking a little bit more in depth about that in a moment. We also have live and recorded webinars. Again, those are on a variety of APA and scholarly writing topics. And then we have interactive self-paced modules. And I'll be talking a little bit more detail in these as we go along. Go move to the next slide. Thanks, Amber. So our paper review service, as I noticed, it's our tier 1 service, and the purpose is to provide students feedback. And we encourage students to sign up for paper reviews frequently. That's the best way to really get to develop their writing skills through Writing Center paper reviews. Within a paper review, a writing instructor will focus on a select pattern of a student's writing, so not to overwhelm the student, and also to give the student some specific writing topics to focus on. So within that, we'll offer some modeling and examples, and we'll also offer links to specific resources where they can continue to develop their writing skills. If you can move to the next. So the logistics of the paper review, students will make appointments in MyPass. They can have up to 3 appointments per week. And as they noted, we recommend students to sign up continuously for Writing Center appointments to really benefit from continual feedback from a writing instructor. The paper reviews are asynchronous, so students don't have to set aside any type of like specific time during the day. Basically, they can sign up for the paper review, and their writing instructor will give them feedback within 48 hours. So either the day of the appointment or the day after. And we do have, if you download the slides, you can check out the introduction to our paper reviews, which provides a little bit more of what we offer through our paper reviews, what we do and don't review, and some suggestions for a paper review for applying paper review feedback and other tips. So that might be a good URL in the future to provide students in it when you're providing feedback. And the next, thanks. And we have student webinars. These webinars are both live and recorded. Again, they cover a wide variety of academic writing, grammar, and APA topics, whether they're live or recorded. You can have students can check the calendar and register for upcoming live webinars, or they can also search the archive, the webinar archive. And these webinars are 1 hour in length. However, students don't have to, for the archive webinars, review the webinar in one sitting. And the next slide. And then we have modules. So these are self-paced interactive tutorials where students can continue to develop and practice several different types of writing skills, such as grammar. We have plagiarism prevention modules, and of course, a variety of APA modules, and a module on academic paragraphing. These are helpful for students to work on as a way to continue to build their skills. So for instance, maybe they go to our website and they look at our page on, how to cite. So they'll get some examples there. If they want to continue to practice to continue to develop those skills, they might take one of our APA modules where they can practice and test their knowledge. If you would like to go to the next one. Okay, so this I'm going to actually pass back to Amber because she's going to talk about some faculty resources.
Thanks, Veronica. So all of the resources that Veronica has shared so far would be appropriate for really most any student. I think it would just be a matter of taking a look at them, knowing your students, knowing the particular challenges in the courses or the competencies where you're working. But we do have a few resources like this where we've tried to kind of match the resource to the student. So for one, we have what we call the Writing Resource Matchmaker, and this is an interactive tool for faculty where you can, on the link provided, and again, as Veronica said, we'll share these slides so you'll be able to interact with the hyperlinks a little bit more easily. But when you enter that link, you'll be taken to sort of a module for faculty. You'll hit start and you'll enter in the different challenges that a student is having or that maybe multiple students are having in your course, and it will provide some recommended resources for that particular issue. And it will also provide some comments that you can use in student writing, so you can cut and paste those comments and use them as you provide feedback to those students to point them to various resources. We also have a faculty referral form where if you would like us to reach out directly to a student, we can't do this obviously for many students, but if you have a student who's maybe hesitant, they're not taking your recommendations for looking at Writing Center resources, you can fill out this form, let us know what's going on with the student, where the struggles seem to be, and we can have one of our writing instructors, and usually it's Veronica actually, reach out directly to the student, invite them to make a paper review appointment, share some kind of pointed resources with them, and then I can also provide you some ideas too. So if you let me know, I've tried this and that didn't really work, or they went to this webinar and it didn't seem to sink in for them, what can I do next? So it's just a good way to get some ideas for a particular student, but then also you might find some things that you can use with other students. If you have a class that you teach a lot or a competency where you see your students kind of hitting the same barriers or struggling with the same pieces. And as I mentioned earlier, we do provide classroom course visits. So if you'd like one of our Writing Center staff members to spend a week inside your Blackboard classroom and answer questions, just sort of, show up in the classroom to introduce ourselves in that way, that can be a really good help to kind of ease that transition from students who might be hesitant to use Writing Center services. I mentioned earlier, a lot of our students who are coming in undergraduate programs are coming in with kind of a confidence gap. And if they are referred to the Writing Center first thing, that can sometimes be a hit to their confidence. So if you were to have a Writing Center course visit, it sort of lets them know this is a pretty normalized piece of being a student, is to get this kind of support from the Writing Center. So that can be another option as well. I'll hand things back over to Veronica.
Thanks, Amber. So We also have some resources targeted for specific populations, such as international and multilingual students, students with disabilities, and military students. We'll move to the next slide. And for multilingual and international writers, you'll see we both have student and faculty resources. I'm sorry. So again, we have grammar webinars and grammar modules that will be helpful for international or multilingual students to continue to practice some of their writing skills that are specific to sentence structure, grammar, clarity. And in terms of, the Walden Writing Center also collaborates with CFE to offer coaching sessions for Walden faculty on working with international and multilingual students, student writers. So we do have that as a resource that you can use for support. You go to the next slide. And for students with disabilities, we do offer accommodations. Students may, of course, register with disabilities. Not all students with a disability are registered with disability services. But what we do provide students who are registered with disability services is paper review accommodations. And that comes in the form of regular guaranteed paper reviews. We also have transcripts and closed captioning available for any of our Writing Center multimedia resources. And for military students, we have our webinar, which is Academic Writing for Military Students, which provides tips for transitioning from writing for the military to writing in academia, as well as tips on, sorry, I'm having some tech issues, as well as tips on how military students might use their experience in their academic writing. And of course, students are offered other resources at Walden, such as the Office of Military Services, which also provides support for students who are transitioning from the military to academic studies. So I'm going to pass it back to you, Amber.
Thanks, Veronica. All right, so we hope to take a few minutes here to have just a brief discussion, and that can be in the chat. You can unmute yourself if you like. We're just hoping that within this room there might be some experiences and expertise that might help other folks in the room and also help us at the Writing Center to know what you're seeing in your classrooms and competencies. So just generally, have you had any success stories or specific challenges with undergraduate writing and writers lately? And is there anything that you would maybe share with your colleagues in the room? And I see Robert has a question. I'll answer that while everyone kind of gives that initial question some thought. So the question was, are there specific places we can locate these resources? Most of the resources that Veronica shared are student-facing resources that you can locate on the Writing Center website. And most of the resources that I mentioned on the one particular slide, and then the things like the faculty referral form that you asked about, Robert, those are all available on the Writing Center Toolbox for Faculty, which is our kind of faculty-facing subsite. Thank you, Anne. Anne has posted the link to that in our chat box tonight. You can find that in the faculty portal. You can also find that linked from the homepage of the main Writing Center site. It's on the CFE site in a couple of places as well. So there's a few spots where you can locate the faculty toolbox, and always feel free to reach out to me as well. The primary purpose that I serve within the Writing Center is to act as a liaison between faculty and the Writing Center. So feel free to reach out if you ever lose track of something that we've talked about, or if you get into a bind trying to find a resource. That's what I'm here for. So feel free to reach out to me directly if you ever lose track. Roman has mentioned the idea of Grammarly, and thank you. We didn't get into that too much here, and it's one of those things where there was one week when I was answering faculty emails where one faculty member wrote to me to say that we should stop talking about Grammarly so much, and another person said, "Why is it so hard to find Grammarly in your resources?" And I think it's a little bit of a love-hate thing with Grammarly. If you're not aware of it, what Grammarly is, it's a software program that we have at Walden. We have an institutional account at Walden. So if you didn't know that, be sure that you or your students, if you decide to use Grammarly, you have free access to a premium version of Grammarly through Walden. Just be sure to use your Walden email address and be sure to log on using the institutional link. If you just go to grammarly.com on Google, you're going to find a different link that they'll start asking you to pay. So be sure that you go through our institutional link, which you can find on the Writing Center website. And what it does, it works, kind of like a very sophisticated version of Microsoft Word's grammar check and spell check. It identifies errors and it provides little instructional ideas for how to make a change and what the problem is. So like little mini lessons. It can be very, very helpful. I think the reason it sometimes falls into the hate side of the love and hate is that if there's a student who has a lot of details that are pretty jumbled in their sentence structure, so if they have sentences that you really can't discern the meaning, or sentences that are organized in such a way that you are really having trouble following it, sometimes that's too much for Grammarly's algorithm to handle, and it winds up just skipping that sentence. So some students with pretty severe syntax issues will walk away with the impression that their writing is in good shape because Grammarly didn't detect anything. So that's just one thing to be aware of. I think it works for most people as one tool among many. Obviously, it's not a good substitute for a human reader, but it's fast, it's private. Sometimes a student who wouldn't necessarily want to kind of hand their paper over to a stranger, they're willing to put it through a computer system. So just kind of have that in your back pocket as well. We didn't talk about it a lot. Part of the reason we don't talk about it a lot is that people seem to really find it. We know that we are Grammarly's #1 user, at least we were last year. We've got many students and faculty using Grammarly on a regular basis, like so much so that Grammarly sometimes contacts us and says, "What is going on at Walden? You all really like our product." So just know that that's there, and we know that students are using it, but kind of take it with a grain of salt and make sure that your students take it with a grain of salt too, because it really should be one tool among many. And is there anything in the chat? Again, I'm afraid anytime I try to enlarge it, I
Thank
move
you,
the
Amber.
slides.
Yes, we do have a comment from Barbara that one challenge is that students can write poorly but still pass the course. So it's difficult to motivate them.
That's interesting. And I wonder too, I don't know all of the rubrics and all of the courses. Is that part of the issue too, that within the grading rubric, you only have so much leeway to factor in writing skills? Feel free to jump in the chat if I'm interpreting that correctly, because I think thanks, Barbara. Okay. I think that's something that I've seen in some rubrics, and I think sometimes that's by design. The writing is one skill among many, and we want to make sure that students who have good grasp of the material, good understanding of the content, that being a developing writer isn't the one thing that keeps them from moving on from one course to the next. But I know that's a challenge when you're trying to really instill in a student good writing skills and they're able to kind of keep moving along. I know that can be an issue. Something that I did teach the first term of 2021, I taught a CGE course. And something that I noticed in that course wasn't so much about the rubrics. I felt like the rubrics did give me some leeway to talk about writing. And of course, as a Writing Center person, I had to kind of watch my my tendency to want to teach everything about writing and not just what was going on in the course content. I did notice that a lot of the students, because of the speed of the course, they didn't seem to necessarily be taking my feedback on board from assignment to assignment. So because there were no revisions, because they were just like, okay, that paper's done, that was my grade, on to the next thing, it was hard to kind of get them invested in looking at the feedback I was providing. So I tried to be very, very put it in every place I could. So I would email the student, I would include it in their rubric, kind of the spaces in the rubric, I would include it in the actual paper itself. And I would kind of ask them a question, I saw this in your last paper and I'm seeing it again here, where's the disconnect? What's going on? And I didn't always get feedback there. Some students continued to make the same errors paper to paper. I think they might have just been looking at the grades or might not have had time to really digest the feedback. But some students did. And some students said, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't actually know what you meant by that. But they had hesitated to say that to me until I reached back out. So I know that's one of the challenges too, is to sometimes feel like when you're providing feedback about the writing, sometimes it doesn't always reach the reader, but sometimes it does. I think it's always hard to kind of strike that balance. And something I'll say too, having kind of been on both sides, teaching in the course and working in the writing center, I do think that there's something about the relationship between a writing instructor, sort of a, writing center person and the student that's a little bit lower stakes. And I think they'll sometimes ask us the questions that they won't ask their faculty members. I mean, I've definitely seen a level of vulnerability when I was working with students directly with their writing at the writing center than I ever did when I was their faculty member. And that makes sense, right? Like they, as a faculty member, you're the one that has an evaluative job. You're assigning grades, you're assigning actual results to the writing that you're looking at, where we're just kind of providing support, we're providing resources and feedback, but we have no say at all over their grade. So I think there's a dynamic there where it can be a good partnership if you have a student who's maybe a little quiet, not really asking you questions or giving you the responses that you need. They might open up more to a writing center instructor. So that's maybe something to think about as well. So Barbara, have you thought about badging after students complete writing modules and meet specific criteria?
Amber, I could actually jump in on this.
Please do.
Sure. Yeah, great question. We have thought a little bit about badging. The modules right now are set up in an Adobe Connect as a platform, and that doesn't allow us to do badging, but we are currently looking into what kind of the next steps are for those modules. So I'm a part of that project, and I'll definitely consider that feedback. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. All right, well, I'm going to go ahead and move on, but if there's anything else that you want to share, feel free to keep adding that into the chat box. So I mentioned this earlier, but I just wanted to make sure to point you again to the Writing Center Faculty Toolbox. This is our faculty-facing site. We have lots of resources there for faculty, including the request form to schedule a course visit. We have a Yammer group where we have conversations about writing and about getting advice from each other and from Writing Center staff about supporting student writers. We have in that classroom announcements page at the top left that you might see there, I've got a lot of kind of pre-formatted text that you can use either in your feedback or in your classroom announcements. If you'd like to recommend the Writing Center, we've got some wording there with the embedded hyperlinks to where they should go, just a little bit of a time saver. And if you have a text expander practice where you use something like Phrase Express or your words kind of auto text, that can be useful there too. Just lots of resources throughout the site that you might find helpful as a faculty member. And that's the site that I manage. So if you ever see anything missing or if you find yourself looking for something and can't find it, absolutely feel free to reach out to me. We did want to mention that we do have some student-facing webinars that you might find helpful. One coming up later in this month is the Paraphrasing Primer. It's a kind of interactive workshop that's going to help students learn how to paraphrase sources successfully. So it kind of goes through the basics of paraphrasing. And you've got the registration link there and the time there. And in June, there's going to be a scholarly writing for undergraduate students session. So something that covers some of the basics of scholarly writing with undergraduate students as the specific audience. So if you'd like to pass that along to students, I always include that information in my faculty newsletter, and also that's always available on the Writing Center website under webinars. And as I mentioned a couple of times, we've got lots of ways to stay in touch. So if you find yourself kind of forgetting about the Writing Center, or it's just doesn't cross your radar much, there's a couple of ways to keep it there and to stay updated on what we have for students and for faculty. One is to subscribe to my monthly emails, which I think I've probably plugged 4 times by now. Just send me an email and say that you'd like to be added to my list, and I'm happy to send you those. I send them out about once a month, and I've got those also on the toolbox if you want to see past updates, and the most current updates are always there as well. We also have a student-facing newsletter that has information that you might find helpful to pass along to your students, or that you'll know that student-facing events are coming up, and you can kind of alert your students to those. And you're welcome to subscribe to that as well. And then, as I mentioned, we have a Yammer group for those of you who might be on Walden's Yammer called Supporting Walden Student Writers. And I try to post there, once a week or so with questions and information. And other faculty will chime in with ideas and strategies to kind of share with each other. Any questions about any of what we've talked about before we wrap up for the night? Thanks, Anne, for asking about slides. I'll be sending them also by email, probably in the next day or two. And within that email, I think Anne is going to include a link to our survey about our session. You can let us know what you think and what might be helpful later. We're always trying to come up with resources for faculty and for students that are really responsive to what you're seeing in the classroom. So please let us know if there's any other webinars you'd like to see, or other resources that you would find useful but you haven't seen us providing. Please feel free to respond to the survey with that, and also just to reach out to me at any point. I'd be very happy to chat with you about what you're seeing and how we can help. All right, thanks so much.